Hi there. Welcome to season one of Carefullist, the podcast. We're so glad that you could join us to talk about all things caregiving. This season, we have an incredible lineup of topics that I know will be helpful. But before I get into who that is and what that is, for those of you who don't know me, I thought I'd share a little bit about my story. I'm Katie Christophic, founder of the Carefullist. And the way that the Carefullist came about was because my mom had Alzheimer's disease. I live a couple hours away in a different state and wanted to still be able to contribute to her care. My dad and my sister were her primary caregivers. And the way that I initially started participating was to visit on weekends and bring meals for their freezer so that they didn't have to cook as often and things like that. But as time went on, their work amped up, and I knew I needed to start being able to help with more things. So, what could I do as somebody who didn't live close by? I started researching for them and networking for them and finding vendors or local businesses or local individuals who could help with various things. Um, I started doing some of the shopping so that as my mom was losing weight, because of the disease and her lack of mobility, she needed new clothes. So I was able to do things like that. And the more I researched things and took time to look for information, the more I realized just how long that takes. And it was number one, it was eye opening for me. And number two, it was frustrating for me because we live in the information age, right? We should be able to find things quickly and know that whatever we found is right and it's good and it's going to work. The average caregiver spends at least 13 hours every month on research for their person. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time that you could be spending in your relationship with that person. That's time that you could be spending on yourself, that you need to spend on yourself to take care of yourself. And so, what I decided to do was create the Carefullist, which is a social community. So, we have social channels and we also have a website of resources to pull together all the things that I've found and everything that I've learned to try and save you time. And the other component of this, which is why this podcast exists now, is the isolation factor and how lonely it can feel and how lonely it can be to be a caregiver because your relationship with the person you're taking care of has changed, right? It's become a little bit more transactional rather than the spousal relationship, the parent child relationship, the grandparent to grandchild, niece to uncle, nephew to aunt, whatever the relationship. It's different now. And it is really hard sometimes to find other people who get it, even though there are 53 million of us in the United States, which is a huge portion of the country, right? People just don't talk about it. And so you have neighbors, you have colleagues, you have people that you come across every day who are in your shoes, but we don't know that because we don't share it. So I'm very, very fortunate to have found other folks who are willing to share their stories. So the caregivers on season one are currently caregivers or they are former caregivers. And most of them, not all, most have then either joined a company that is serving caregivers in some way, or they have started their own project or company to help serve caregivers. And that is the goal and the conversations that we're going to be having this season. So, the types of topics that we're going to cover, I'm really excited about them. And this is in no particular order. We are going to cover finances for caregiving. There are a lot of things that pop up when you are starting to take on someone else's finances, but then also the cost of care itself and planning for your future. and their future. And what does that look like? And where should you take money from? Where should you leave it alone? And what are the best practices? So, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to talk about aging in place. Most people, I'm going to flub the statistic, but it's in the 90 percentile. So, 90% or more of adults want to age at home. They want to stay where they are. So, how do you do that? How do you ensure that your living space is optimized for everything that comes with aging and or folks who are younger but they're experiencing disease challenges or mobility challenges? So do you have a house that has hallways that are wide enough for a walker or doorways that are wide enough for a walker? Things like that. So we'll be having that conversation. We're going to talk about creating a village and how important that is, and how much there are big portions of America that have gotten away from that. And we don't have the relationships and the neighborhood feel that maybe we did at one time. So, how do we start to reestablish not a whole network? Start small, one or two people. And how does that conversation begin? And how does that contribute to not only being able to accept some help when you need it and have someone you can rely on, but also combat that isolation that you feel like you are the only one in this very narrow world of caregiving? We're going to cover what happens when a caregiver gets sick. One of our guests was a caregiver for a parent and unfortunately became a patient herself. And so, how did she navigate the system as a patient, also now knowing what the perspective is of a caregiver? We're going to talk with a hospital chaplain. And this conversation was extremely interesting and eye opening. You definitely want to catch that episode. It educates everyone, including myself, about the role and the different ways hospital chaplains can be of service to patients and caregivers. It's not everything that you expect. Um, what is a care manager? There is an agency called Aging Life Services, and we're going to talk to the president of their board, and she explains what they do and how they can help you figure out what you need, what you can afford, and what's local to you. It's an extremely important episode, and you should definitely make sure you catch that one. We're going to talk with the founder of Inner Hive, which is an app for caregivers that can help you to log and manage all of your caregiving tasks in one place. And the great thing about this is if you are far away and you're caregiving, you can share this information with folks who are local. If you're local and you have family anywhere else and they want to be able to see what's going on and be able to tag team in for care and have all of the information they need, it's right there. It's a really good conversation. We're going to talk with the founder of All Home Care Matters podcast. If you're on this podcast, you're interested in podcasts, you're checking them out, you're thinking, oh, well, I'm looking for my people, I'm looking for what I want to hear. All Home Care Matters covers lots of different caregiver stories. They cover different products, different companies that have been established, and they talk to folks from all walks of life in this caregiving journey. So if you haven't checked out that podcast, you should. And you should hear what Lance has to say about his own story, because it is really interesting. And all of these folks have become active in this space because of their own personal journey. So every episode delves in first to their caregiving journey so you can hear their story and what their struggles were and what their background is. And then it gets into how did they decide they're going to contribute to helping other folks who are in the same position. And last but certainly not least, we're going to talk with Health Advocate. This is a company that works directly with employers to support caregivers at work. So 1 in 5 caregivers works full time. That is a lot of people. So, and I mean, depending on your personal experience, there are a lot of companies that aren't really sure what to do or how to offer help. So they just don't say anything. So, Health Advocate has a service that they offer that is sort of like an EAP, if you're familiar with an employee advocate program or employee assistance program, one of the two. Anyway, it falls into that category. So if you're listening to this and you happen to be in human resources, or if you're working for a company and you go, gosh, I know of several people, including myself, who could use something that supports me while I'm at work, talk to your HR professional and see if you can't get a meeting to talk about Health Advocate and the benefit that they can provide to you. So as I'm talking, you hear me a little bit congested. You hear me flubbing things here and there. This is my first foray into podcasting. I've never done this before. Certainly, well, as a host, I've never done this before. I've been on like 2 podcasts as a guest. This is new. These episodes are not perfect, nor do I want them to be. The goal of this podcast is for people to feel like other folks get it, for people to understand that there are people who understand. And we're not perfect. Nobody is perfect. There is no such thing as perfection in caregiving. It is doing the best that you can with what you've got. And I will count this a success if it contributes in some small way to making things a little bit easier for you. So grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea, get the dog's leash, take us along for your walk. We're going to talk about caregiving and we're going to have a good time together. And as always, if you need anything, if you have questions, if you have suggestions of what you would like us to talk about here on the podcast, or things that you would like to see, resources that you've used that you find really helpful that we don't currently list on our site, please reach out to us. You can contact us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And you can also reach out to us on our website, which is www.carefullist.com. And we have a contact us form there. I'm Katie Christophic, your host. Let's get this thing started.